Hello and welcome to this online workshop about what it takes to raise $20,000, $100,000 or more on Kickstarter or other crowdfunding platform of your choice. My name is Heath Robinson and it is great to have you here. This is a presentation that I've done at a number of different conventions that I've gone to, but I've also given this presentation as guest lectures, especially at the University of Montevallo in their game design program. They've got a game design program that mainly focuses on tabletop games, actually. And most of my crowdfunding experience has been in the area of tabletop games. I've run a couple of different independent tabletop game publishing companies, and so that's basically where my experience comes from. But this presentation has been set up so that it will apply to any type of product that you're trying to do. The particulars of how to design and manufacture your product will be different depending on what it is that you're creating. But basically, if you're trying to create any type of physical product and then get it out to the people who want to support you through a crowdfunding effort, then this presentation is going to apply to you. You're going to be able to put in your numbers for your product and figure out what kind of effort is going to be required to raise the amount of money that you need. All right, so let's get into it. So let's talk about what we're going to be talking about in this presentation. I've got a few different parts here. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but people may want to know who I am and what I've done, and so what kind of experience I have as far as knowing what I'm talking about here and providing this information. Then I'm going to talk about what the purpose of this presentation is, so you know what you're going to be getting out of it and what you can expect to get out of it. So you know what I'm going to be covering and what I'm not. Then I've got basically two parts here. The first part is budgeting estimation, because that's very important. Basically, we're going to be looking at numbers throughout this entire presentation. And the first part is budgeting it, budgeting your project so you understand what type of, what amount of money you're going to require in different stages of the process. And then part two is a really serious breakdown of the marketing effort that's going to be required to raise the amount of money based on what you came up with in part one for your budgeting estimation. So that's what we're going to be doing, and then we will wrap up here and summarize. So, all right. So who am I? Like I said, my name is Heath Robinson. I have done a couple of different tabletop game companies. Originally, I did a tabletop game publishing company with my brother. After working on that company with my brother, I went on to found Infinite Black, which did Elder Dice, and this was a product series. We released lots of different Elder Dice, 4 different Elder Dice Kickstarter campaigns. And all of these products were brought out on Kickstarter and were funded through crowdfunding. So, so far, I have worked almost exclusively on Kickstarter as far as a crowdfunding platform goes. But there are other options. This really isn't a presentation on the different types of platforms that are out there and whether you should use one website or another. But anything in this presentation will apply to any type of campaign you're doing, whether you're doing an Indiegogo campaign or running it on Indiegogo or any other crowdfunding platform. But all of my major crowdfunding efforts have been on Kickstarter. You can see I've done 9 different Kickstarters so far, and you can see that they've raised a widely varying amount of money as the companies have continued to grow and you get better at crowdfunding and so forth. So this is you can see different crowdfunding campaigns. And then, really, of course, it was with Elder Dice that started to get traction, started bringing in larger numbers of backers, and which means more money on Kickstarter. In total, that's over $2.5 million worth of funding on Kickstarter. Now, of course, that's gross. If you're actually familiar with business and operations and things like that, just because you raise that amount of money does not mean that you put $2.5 million in your pocket. That's far from it. Those things are very different. But in total, that's how much has been raised, and that's why that's been the major driver for everything that I've wanted to do creatively so far. All right, moving on. So what's the purpose of this presentation? The first purpose of the presentation is really to understand the massive effort necessary to fund a Kickstarter campaign at a high level. So I talk to a lot of people about running crowdfunding campaigns and running their own business and things like that. And one of the major issues is that people don't have an understanding of actually what effort it's going to take. And of course, I didn't when I first got started developing my first board game and going to crowdfunding with it. I just kind of jumped in and, we were going to get it done, and we did get it done. But developing a crowdfunding campaign as well as manufacturing your product, designing your product through manufacturing and all of that is a major effort. And of course, this is mainly talking about the marketing side of things. So we're not even talking about design and manufacturing for the most part here. But even the running of the campaign is going to be a massive effort. And some people don't understand that. And B here, I want to help temper expectations for new product designers. That kind of goes along with what I'm talking about as far as the massive effort in understanding what you have to do. Because what can you expect realistically your first time out? That's kind of important to know, because once again, there are a lot of people who have very unrealistic expectations for what you're going to be able to do in a crowdfunding campaign. And so I kind of want to temper those expectations. Over here on this channel, so we tend to talk rather straight here and be realistic about what can be done. So understanding and tempering expectations. But the flip side of that, and I think this is an important flip side, is on one hand, you're tempering expectations, but on the other hand, you should be gaining confidence in your ability to raise funds if you know the steps. So instead of, wild-eyed, unrealistic expectations, you get that tempered, but on the other hand, okay, what does this actually take? You're gaining confidence because it's actually a structure that you have to go through, that you want to gain confidence by understanding the steps, understanding what you have to do, working through all of the numbers for yourself based on the numbers for your campaign. That's very important. And know what it's going to take in order to actually raise the funds that you want to raise or need to raise for your project. And also, again, understanding some of the reality of crowdfunding now. When I got started with War of Kings, that was basically the tail end of when Kickstarter was still the wild, wild west. You can go back and you can look at these campaigns, and in some video here on YouTube, what I might do is go back and evaluate some of my early crowdfunding campaigns and talk about them, because they were the first. So when you look at what somebody did, some of their later campaigns, well, if you look at like Elder Dice Shards of Illumination, okay, well, that's an extremely sophisticated campaign. There's a lot going on in that campaign, but that's not how I started. I don't recommend anybody start like that. You're looking at something that's rather advanced, because I've been through 8 other campaigns by the time I did that one. So if you go back and look at some earlier campaigns, you start to look at much more modest things, things that can be done with a lot less effort than something like an Elder Dice Shards of Illumination campaign. But on the other hand, the flip side of that is that things change with social media, with Kickstarter, with all of these different things. So just because you go back and you look at what worked for me, for instance, with War of Kings, that was a very different time. People were expecting very different things. I don't think that it would necessarily fund today. So we're talking about what are people doing on crowdfunding kind of now, and what are people going to expect. So you always have to go back and forth with, well, what am I looking at now? But I'm looking at a very advanced campaign versus, okay, well, let me go back and look at an earlier campaign, but it may or may not. The environment has certainly changed since those early campaigns. All right, let's get into it then with part 1, which is the big picture. And this is some very important stuff right here. So in order to be successful, you're going to need to mobilize a large number of people to back your campaign, and this is entirely your responsibility. If it's your campaign, your product, what you're doing, it's your responsibility to have the people there who want to back your project. This means that having some awesome product is not enough. You're going to have to think like a publisher from day one, and that means you're going to have to start marketing. Do you know the old adage, if you build it, they will come? Well, I do not believe that's true. You can build and design an amazing product, but if people don't know about it, they're not going to come to your crowdfunding campaign or your direct sales on your website or whatever it is. People are bombarded by information today, obviously. Social media and everything like this. Information is coming at people all the time. If you're not out there promoting it, well, then you're not going to be seen, which means that people aren't going to be able to come and back your campaign. So you've got to be thinking like a publisher from the very first in order to mobilize the amount of people that you need. How many people? Well, we'll be talking about how to get some estimation on the number of people you'll need later in this presentation. And by the way, hope is not a marketing strategy. I see a lot of people who want to try to just work with hope marketing. Well, I'm going to build this thing and then I'm going to put up a Kickstarter page and then I hope it goes viral and maybe I'll make a lot of money. Well, that's doesn't have anything to do with your marketing campaign. So this is part of what we're talking about as far as realistic expectations. If you're just hoping that a lot of people are going to love your product and come by and just spontaneously give you a lot of money, that's not a marketing strategy. You're just, kind of putting it out there, and it's not going to happen for you. So we're not going to use hope marketing if you're going to be crowdfunding your own product here, at least not according to this presentation that I'm going right here, that I'm giving you, but that has to do with giving you confidence as well that, okay, I'm not going to use hope marketing to try to get this campaign funded. I'm going to work through the steps. I'm going to see where I need to be, and then I'm going to get to where I need to be. Here is the secret to running a Kickstarter campaign or other crowdfunding campaign. It doesn't have to be Kickstarter. Here's the secret. So if you want to just have this slide right here during the presentation and then leave, well, you have the secret already. And the secret is this. Have a large number of people who are very enthusiastic about what you're doing and who are ready to back your project on day one. If you have that, then you'll be successful. If you don't have that, you're probably not going to be successful. And basically, this is what I ask people when I talk to them as far as crowdfunding consulting goes. This is one of the very first things I tell people. I mean, here's the secret. Do you have a large number of people who are very enthusiastic about what you're doing and are ready to back on day one? If you don't, that's a problem. You've got to find those people. If you do, well, then you're probably going to be okay. Now, there's a lot to talk about as far as how do you plan your awards and how do you actually build your Kickstarter page so that you've got all the information that you want. And that's fine. That all has to be done as well. But the core part is if you have an enthusiastic group of people, then you're going to be ready. If you don't, then you're not. And this has to do with building the crowd. I mean, it is crowdfunding, so you have to have a crowd. You don't want to be launching to the crickets, as I like to say. So if you launch your campaign and you hear nothing but crickets, well, it means you don't have a crowd. So social media, all of these different things, it is definitely easier for somebody who has like a massive YouTube following already to do a crowdfunding campaign because they've got the crowd. Okay, they've got people who love what they're doing, who are interested in what they're doing. So that's it. Have a large number of people who just love you and what you're doing and really want to back your product on the very first day. Got that? You'll be fine. All right, let's start with a basic budget breakdown. And this may be something that a lot of creatives particularly aren't familiar with. If you are kind of focused on the creation of your product and how do you make things, well, how do you start budgeting your project? Well, I've got kind of a simple method here that will get you started, but it's one that I use whenever I'm trying to make a product. You basically have a number of different buckets. That's how I conceptualize it. A different number of buckets for different categories of things that are going to happen, and then you're going to have to put money in those buckets according to certain amounts based on your needs. And so what we've got to do is we've got to assign the buckets, and then we've got to figure out how much needs to be put in each bucket. So the first kind of bucket that I think about is pre-production budget. This is your development of the product basically to its prototype stage and before you can actually start manufacturing, whatever it is. So pre-production, this is all of the design of your product, art that you might have to commission, sculpting that has to be done, the prototyping, mold making, those kinds of things that are all design and pre-production work. That requires some amount of money. Then you will need to have a marketing budget, and this marketing budget will allow you to connect with people who want to buy your product or back your product on a crowdfunding campaign. Then you have the production budget, and the production budget is actually getting the products made. So this is after all of the development. You got the prototype sitting there, and you got a manufacturer who's ready to go and says, how much is it going to cost to actually manufacture this prototype? That's your production budget in order to get those back from your manufacturer. Then you've got freight and shipping budgets, and this is getting those rewards, those objects, whatever they are, to your backers. So that's 4 buckets. You need to think about pre-production, your marketing, your production, and your freight and shipping budget. These different budget buckets also represent basically the steps that you're going to be going through in order to get your project done anyway. Okay, so we're going to have to come up with some numbers here to put in each one of these buckets. And I'm going to give you some basic numbers, but numbers change. Numbers are going to change because, first of all, prices go up when we talk about things like shipping. But then also, well, what you're actually trying to create is going to require different amounts of money for production and things like that. So I'm going to go through several different examples with you here, but then you need to take the examples and start working through them with your own numbers for your own product. let's talk about an estimation of shipping costs. And this may actually seem like a strange place to start to you, because if you're like, but hey, I want to do this kind of creative project. I got this great idea for this product, whether it's action figures or board games or whatever it is. At the end of the day, you are responsible for getting a physical product to your backers on a crowdfunding campaign, or also just a customer if they're buying it from you on the website direct. So actually, even though it's the end of the process, the shipping part, it's actually a great place to start thinking about it, because you're thinking at the end of the day, what is it that I have to do? And at the end of the day, if you're doing a physical product, you've got to put a physical product in a box, package it, and send it to somebody and put it on their doorstep. That's what you got to do. And then they open it up and then they're happy. And then you're done, right? They've given you money. You sent them the product. Everybody's happy. That's the end. And if you can't do that, then you haven't run a successful campaign. And I have seen so many different people who have tried to, run a crowdfunding campaign, and then you get updates from them about, well, shipping's more expensive than I thought. I need to raise some more money, or you may have to send me some more money for shipping, or, or people just say something like, well, shipping costs went up since I last, when I ran this campaign. Took me a long time to get the products done. Now shipping's more expensive than I thought, and I need more money. And again, I can't actually ship. That's a very bad situation to be in, especially if you have all of the products like sitting in a warehouse or something like that, and then you realize, oh, I didn't budget correctly for shipping. So knowing how much it's going to take to get that product from the warehouse, wherever you've got it stored, and putting it on the doorstep of your backer is extremely important. And it's much more expensive than you might think. And this is one of those situations where prices go up. So I'm going to put some pricing tables here. But actually, this pricing table is a few years old anyway. So I bet, priority mail shipping and all of that has probably gone up since I did this. But it's still probably more expensive than you think. So you need your own table like this. So shipping is primarily determined by the size and weight of the shipping box plus the cost of packaging. Okay, that's basically what you're talking about. That's what's going to enable you to get a shipping estimate earlier than your product is done, because you need to know the size and weight of the shipping box plus the cost of packaging. So this is just an estimation of shipping costs here, based on a 3-pound package, a 7-pound package, and a 10-pound package. And how much does it cost to ship within the United States? Well, and like I said, I think this has gone up. Like these priority mail flat rate boxes. Flat rate boxes are really good because they give you a cap. In the United States, like how much is the maximum I'm going to be spending to getting this product to a backer? Well, if it fits in a priority flat rate box, go find out what the flat rate is for the box. Then no matter what the weight is, whatever you put in it, that's how much it's going to cost, and it's not going to cost you more. So that's a really good way to go. So assuming that you can put something in a flat rate medium box, whether it weighs 3, 7, or 10 pounds, well, I could ship it for a maximum of $18.75. Okay, but then what if you got to send something to Germany or Australia or South Africa? I mean, in my world, which is predominantly board games, let me give you some examples here. This right here is a War of Kings game box. This is the box for the very first game, and so very first product that I ever developed, and I did this with my brother. So this is the War of Kings game box. It's a big box, and it's also heavy. This is, I think, about 7.5 pounds. So at the end of the day, what do I have to do in order to run this campaign successfully? Well, we had to put this large box that weighs 7.5 or 8 pounds, and we've got to get it to everybody around the world. And that can be expensive. We shipped all of the War of Kings reward boxes ourselves. We put every backer's rewards in boxes and shipped them from Seth's house, actually. So that means we were also fulfilling international orders. And you know what it costs to take something like this and send it to, for instance, South Africa? Well, it's very expensive. It's far more than the cost of the product in order to get it down to South Africa. So a big issue with Kickstarter or any other crowdfunding campaign that you might be running is that you are global from day one. And of course, that has advantages, I suppose, that you can immediately reach a global audience, but it also has some major logistical disadvantages, because even though the internet's digital and you can email people and they can come to your webpage and all these different things, and that is fantastic from around the world, well, at the end of the day, if you have a physical product like that box, you're going to have to get it to everybody around the world. And if you're just packing stuff up at your house and you got to send stuff all the way around the world, well, you got to first of all deal with customs, paperwork, and stuff like that, and that's going to take a while, and that's going to take a lot more money. And is your backer even willing to pay this, or are you just going to end up losing money, potentially a lot of money, as you try to ship all of these things around the world? Basically, that was the case with War of Kings. We had some international backers, and so we packed them up from our house and we sent them to them and did all of the customs paperwork. And basically, if you were an international backer, we lost money. That was just the way it was. There are some things that you can do to mitigate this by having a more robust logistics network. And that's one advantage to crowdfunding now, is that there are a lot more fulfillment partners globally than there were certainly when we were beginning. I mean, we shipped some of them ourselves, or shipped it ourselves, mainly because we had to. There just weren't a whole lot of international options for that, and we didn't have a robust fulfillment network. So as you go on, we talk about this in other videos, but as you go on, if you're developing your company, you probably want to establish a more robust global fulfillment network. Then that's going to bring down your cost of shipping, because you'll be shipping like from Australia from within Australia, or to Australia from within Australia if you've got an Australian fulfillment partner and things like that. But that means that you're going to have to get their data sheets for how much it actually costs to ship a product from their warehouse to a backer in Australia. So trying to get an estimation of my shipping costs is actually something I do from the very start now. Here's another example. Here is a much more manageable size box. This is the Enchantress box right here. So I've got a box this size, I forget what it is, but whatever the size is, and it's got a certain amount of weight to it, and then I can find out how much it's going to cost to ship this. And so if this is going to be my product, then I can get that estimation early. And so when you're designing your product, I create something called basically a product mock-up, which is going to estimate the size and weight of the product. You know, if you're creating, for instance, a board game, a lot of board games have standard components in it. You know, there's going to be a board, there's going to be some miniatures, there's going to be some dice, there's going to be some packs of cards. There's a lot of standard stuff that's inside board games. And so you can also find a box or mock up a box by cutting cardboard to the right size. So you could go, all right, well, I'm trying to create this product. It's going to be a box, you know, about this shape right here. And so create one out of cardboard, and then it's going to have things that are about the following in it, and then put those things from other games or other products that kind of approximate the weight of what your product's going to be. And then you have a box that's a certain size, that's a certain weight. You know, you weigh it, find out what that is. Then you can go to different shipping services if you're going to be shipping it yourself and find out what the rates are going to be, or if you're going to be using some other fulfillment partner, what their weights are going to be, because you can say, hey, I'm thinking about bringing out this product. At the end of the day, it's going to be this size, it's going to be this weight. How much are you going to charge me to ship those out? You can go ahead and get that number early on, because they don't care what's in it. They don't care what type of art it's going to have, you know, or anything like that. They just care about how large is it going to be, and how much does it weigh. That's going to allow you to get your shipping cost estimates. Plus, of course, cost of packaging. Especially if you're doing it yourself, you got to buy the boxes. You got to buy packing peanuts and things like that. You got to buy tape. All those things cost. So size and weight of shipping box, that's your postage, plus all of your packaging. Make sure that you include packaging when you weigh it, because the weight of the box with all of the packaging and the exterior box you're shipping it in, that's what you're paying to ship, not just your product. Cost of packaging goes in. Cost of labor also goes in. If you're doing it yourself, you might not be charging yourself to ship it, but if you're having somebody else ship it, they're going to be charging you for labor that's typically done on a per shipped item box basis. They might have something that's like, well, we charge $1.50 to ship a box. That includes your cost of packaging plus our labor to pack up to 5 items or something like that. That helps you get that estimation. This is, by the way, I have down here also freight costs. This, what we're talking about with estimating shipping right here, this is just your estimation of shipping to go from your warehouse to the backer's front door. That's kind of the last mile. There's also something you have to do called freight, and this is how I distinguish them. Shipping is from the warehouse to your backer's front door. Freight is from your manufacturer to your warehouse. So if you're doing overseas manufacturing, for instance, then you've got to get those products from your manufacturer overseas into a warehouse in your country, that's freight costs. That's your freight costs. After that, shipping goes in. So this is not including freight to get it from your manufacturer to your warehouse. So these numbers might be higher than you were expecting, but that's one of the reasons why we're starting with them. It's going to take a lot to ship, and prices only go up. So expect these to be higher today. So packaging impacts the size of the box. And so this is one reason why I think about packaging and I think about shipping as soon as I start product design. So when Seth, my brother, and I were designing TerraTiles, we actually started with shipping when we started designing the box, because we had been through the War of Kings fulfillment, and we said, I think we want to do something else. So we had the idea to do the TerraTiles boxes. So we designed the TerraTiles boxes so they would fit in a priority mail flat rate medium box. That way we said, this is going to be the size of the box. It's going to fit in this. That way we know exactly how much it's going to cost to get one of these boxes anywhere in the United States. Because we were also doing the fulfillment for TerraTiles Misty Moorlands ourselves. So we fulfilled this from my brother's basement, this whole Kickstarter campaign, as well as the TerraTiles Coasts and Rivers. So you can see from day one, we designed this product so it would fit right inside of a priority mail flat rate box. And then we were going to put packing peanuts down the side. So we had basically an inch or a little bit less than an inch of space on both sides. We wanted this box to sit right in the middle. We wanted to be able to fill those sides with packing peanuts. And this worked extremely well, because this was a picture over here of some of the boxes that our backers got. We had no reported damage in shipping for the product, because we knew that the corners of the boxes often sustain a lot of damage in shipping and in transport. That's why we wanted the TerraTiles box to be slightly smaller than our flat rate shipping box. That way we filled it with packing peanuts. That way when this happens, what you're looking at on the screen, the corners get damaged. You know what? The box wasn't damaged. People would send this and go, man, I got this crushed box from the post office, but the TerraTiles inside were undamaged. And we were like, that's it. That's exactly what we designed it for. So if you're thinking about your product from the beginning, how you're going to get it to people is important. And this is an example of thinking about that from the moment it becomes an idea in your head about what exactly is it that we are sending to people and how are we going to do it. So that's important, and that's a number that you can get for your budget early on. So let's talk about back of the envelope budgeting. And this process is basically the process that I go through for all of my campaigns when I have an initial idea and I'm trying to understand what it's going to take in order to do a Kickstarter campaign. And this is also the same process that I run through with people when I'm doing basically consulting work and talking to other people about how to run their Kickstarter campaigns. I go through this because it's basically really easy to get some estimates and know what you're probably going to be looking at. This is going to start getting us some ballpark figures about how much money you have to raise and where that money is going to be going. So we got Kickstarter processing and payment fees, shipping, freight, manufacturing, and then that's going to get us some kind of grand total here. So let's say that you wanted to raise $20,000, or that you thought that $20,000 would get you where you need to go with your campaign. Now, maybe you have to adjust after this, but you say, hey, I want to raise $20,000. Okay, so we're going to try to raise $20,000. How much are we going to have to give to Kickstarter and payment processing fees? So of that $20,000, expect $1,600 of it to go to Kickstarter and payment processing. Kickstarter takes about 5% of whatever you raise, plus the payment processing platform takes about 4%. Payment processing is something you're going to have to pay regardless of what platform you're on, because if you're running people's credit or debit cards, well, that costs money. So your payment processor is going to take some amount of money from the transaction when it runs. Just reality. Now, generally speaking, the larger the transaction gets, the smaller the payment processing fee gets, because I suppose if you're running electronic payments, whether you're moving, $100 or $150 or $300, doesn't really cost them more. But especially in smaller denominations, rather, the cost of payment processing can become more significant as a percentage of what you're trying to collect. So typically when I'm planning a campaign, if you want to be conservative, expect 10% to go to payment processing as well as Kickstarter in general. Probably it's more like 9%, or if you start to raise more, it's more like 8% or something like that. But figure 9% Figure 10% if you want to be a bit more conservative, so you know that, well, what shows up on the Kickstarter page is not what's going to end up in your bank account, because they're going to take Kickstarter fees and payment processing fees off the top. So let's say here that on a $20,000 campaign, $1,600 of that is going to go to Kickstarter and payment processing fees. Now let's talk about your minimum order size from your manufacturer. So in this case, let's say 1,000. 1,000 is pretty common in the tabletop game space. So we can say 1,000 here if you're trying to get a board game done. Some manufacturers want a minimum order of 1,500, 2,000, something like that. In other product areas, though, that minimum order can be much higher. In the case of more sophisticated toys, for example, some manufacturers won't accept an order for less than 5,000 units. So you need to know what your manufacturer is going to accept. So if it's 1,000, if it's 5,000, if it's 2,000, whatever it is, that's basically your basic buy-in. If you want to do this project at all, you want to create, well, for example, Enchantress, I believe that it had a minimum order of 1,000. So I knew that if we were going to do Enchantress as a board game, the minimum we were going to have to get is 1,000 of these to show up. So you need to know what your manufacturer is going to be requiring for a minimum order, because that's going to be very important in setting your Kickstarter goal or other crowdfunding goal, because you know that at minimum, you got to be able to pay for 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 of your product. Then, of course, if you don't sell them all, then, of course, if they don't all go to backers on your crowdfunding campaign, you're going to have to warehouse them someplace, and, of course, storage costs money. So the larger the minimum order is, the more you're going to have to raise, and then, of course, the more you need to move. Otherwise, you're just going to be paying for them to sit around in a warehouse. So let's say that our goal was to raise this $20,000, and we're thinking, well, how are we going to raise it? Well, I want to raise it, let's say, by having 400 backers come in and all pledge an average of $50. So that's an important number to raise as well. Like, how many backers am I going to need? Well, how much money are you trying to raise? What is the average pledge that you're going to have them try to make on the Kickstarter page? Well, if you know total divided by average pledge, that's going to give you how many different backers you're going to need. So what are we looking at here on the table here? So, well, I did put this 1,000 number in there because the average freight cost per box, we're going to have to freight. If our minimum order is 1,000 products, we're going to have to freight 1,000 from the manufacturer to our warehouse. And we're also going to have to manufacture, obviously, that 1,000. So I'm paying manufacturing and I'm paying freight on all 1,000 of those, since that's my minimum order. But how much do I have to pay to ship? Well, I only have to ship 400 of them. Because remember, shipping is my from the warehouse to the front door. So I'm going to have a shipping cost on 400 of them. So in this scenario here, if 400 of them went out the door on Kickstarter, then I would have to warehouse 600 of them. I'd have 600 left that would have to be warehoused. Then hopefully they could go to other retailers. They could be sold on direct on a website, things like that. You'd have 600 of them left over. So let's say that it costs an average of $13 to ship, and that would include the actual postage of the product, plus the cost of the packaging, plus the cost of the the packing peanuts or whatever like that. All of that's being included, plus the cost of the labor in order to pack up and ship that product. Let's say that I come up with an estimated shipping cost of $13. Well, that means that I'm going to need to spend $5,200 to ship those 400 items. That's a significant chunk of money, because if you're thinking, oh, I raised $20,000, well, I'm going to go buy a bunch of product or something like that. Well, you'd better be hanging on to $5,200 of that, because at the end of the day, once you're ready to send those to the backers, that's going to be going right out the door in order to pay to ship it to them. All right, let's talk about freight costs. And this is just back of the envelope budgeting here. There's a lot that we could actually talk about as far as freight costs go, especially today. And as I'm recording this, this is kind of a weird time to be talking about freight, because we know that we're in the middle of this major supply chain constriction, and that would certainly impact you if you are running a Kickstarter campaign right now and you're trying to get stuff into U.S. ports, or actually ports around the world. As we know, there's incredible backlog at the ports. Freight costs are just going crazy. They are through the roof. So we can talk about what generally it might cost to freight things in ordinary times, but then something like this can happen, and then your freight cost can go sky high. And that is important to think about, because sometimes it can take a year, basically, to do a whole Kickstarter, because by the time you start manufacturing, if your manufacturer requires 30, 60, 90 days, 180 days, depending on the sophistication of your product and how many you're ordering. Manufacturing can take a while. Then you've got to get all of those packed up and palleted and sent to a depot for freight. And then, in the interim of that time, something can go crazy, for instance, with the supply chain, and then all of a sudden your freight cost just skyrockets. And you do have to be prepared for that, because what are you going to do if you've run this Kickstarter campaign and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, the global supply chain just went crazy? Well, you still got to get the products from your manufacturer to your warehouses, and so there isn't a whole lot to do other than just pay it. So that could be sky high. Much of the time, you may be trying to get your own shipping container that is going to be fully packed with your products. Sometimes you'll be shipping less than a container load, and which means that your products will be in a container with other people's products. That can be less expensive because you're not trying to ship your entire shipping container. So there's a lot that could be talked about there, but let's just say that we're going to be paying an average of $4 in freight per product. I would say that's conservative, but it might not be in today's world. So it depends on what your product is. You think about shipping container sizes. This is another reason to know your product size, because if you're thinking about trying to get a shipping container shipped across the ocean on a large cargo ship, well, how many shipping containers are you going to need? Well, like how many boxes of Enchantress can fit in a shipping container? Well, a lot. If you're trying to manufacture, I don't know, lawn mowers or something like that, well, far fewer. So also having the size and weight and the dimensions of your products, that's going to help you know how many can actually fit in shipping containers and start to get that estimate much earlier on. So let's say that you're going to reserve $4 in freight for each item. You're going to have to freight all 1,000 of those. So that's going to be $4,000 there. Again, please. This is the basic structure of the back of the envelope budgeting. Go and get your own numbers when you're working on your own campaign to put in here, so you make sure you've got current and up-to-date numbers based on what you're doing. Now, there's only one more box left here in the back of the envelope budgeting worksheet, and that is the manufacturing cost per box. So the reason I've got that last is because that's basically going to tell you what you can afford to spend actually on manufacturing the product, right? Because you can see that if I'm trying to raise $20,000, now, maybe I need to go and revise that, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to need to raise more than that. But like if we're working on, well, I'm going to try to get 400 people to all give me $50, I'll have $20,000. Where does all that money go? Well, shipping and freight, you're absolutely going to have to pay, and also Kickstarter payment processing fees, you're absolutely going to have to pay. So this final box here is the one that you actually have some control over as the product designer, because if you get more sophisticated with your product, obviously the cost of manufacturing is going to go up. You start to design simpler products, you start to simplify, you can bring the cost of your product down. And you're going to have to buy 1,000 of these or whatever the minimum order is for your project. So assuming numbers like this, already establishing what you have to pay, well then what could we possibly pay to manufacture this product? We find that we can't manufacture this product for more than $9.20. That's the upper limit that I could pay, because if I pay $9.20, then I'll be paying $9,200 in manufacturing costs. And I believe, if I get all these numbers right, that should total up to $20,000. So that's where that $20,000 would go. And looking at this, yeah, it does look like I got that right. So that's $20,000. That would send every penny that you raise on Kickstarter out the door in order to get this product manufactured, shipped, freighted, and put on your backer's doorstep. Now you've got some kind of idea about your manufacturing cost that you can talk to a manufacturer about. Because if your manufacturer comes back and says, yeah, I can do 1,000 of those for you, and it'll cost $14.25 to manufacture each one of them, well, you got your back of the envelope budgeting here. Well, you can't pay $14.25 for your product and only raise $20,000. So you're going to have to readjust your whole budgeting here to account for, well, I got to pay $14.25 for manufacturing, and then readjust everything. Or you go, okay, whoa, I can't pay $14.25. I need to do another product, or I need to simplify the existing product, or whatever it is to bring that down. And of course, you might not want to spend the whole $9.20 anyway. It's probably a good idea. I wouldn't want to if I were looking at this kind of budget, because everything is always more expensive than you think. There are always additional charges in here. palleting fees, the shipping fees, for paperwork at the ports. There's always little things that get hit. And so this is not a full budget for your project. This is just the back of the envelope, basic getting started kinds of stuff. I wouldn't want to spend, in a situation like this, $9.20 on a product. I would want to spend, I'd probably be looking for like $5 or something like that. I'd probably try to half that. So I need to be making a $5 product. That gives me some margin in here to pay all the other things that are going to be coming. And then also, of course, there's nothing in here about you as the creator making any money, right? You're going to go through this Kickstarter, everything it is to run this Kickstarter, all the way through manufacturing, and you're doing it according to this budget right here for no money. You're not making any money as the creator of the product, and you may not be okay with that. You may need some money to survive or something like that. So if you need, $1,000 or something like that, then you need to put that in here because you got to buy groceries, you got to pay some rent or whatever it is that you got to do. You may want to put that in here so you can survive during your Kickstarter operation, or that money will have to come from someplace else because you may be fine without making money on that. In this situation right here, only 400 of those 1,000 boxes are going out the door on the Kickstarter campaign. So a lot of Kickstarter creators will say, this is fine. I'm making no money here on this Kickstarter campaign. Everything is going to getting the product. I'll make my money by selling those other 600 on a website later, or to retailers, or whatever it is. That's pretty common to say, well, I'm just trying to get this, and then at the end of the day, I'll do all of this stuff, and there'll be an extra 600 of my product sitting there in a warehouse, and then I'll sell those, and then I'll have some money. Assuming you can sell those. That's its own challenge, right? Some people haven't ever done just direct internet marketing either, and this really isn't the place to talk about that. But it is certainly the case that a lot of creators get in a situation where they have like 600 games or 600 products of other kinds sitting in their basement, taking up room in their house, or taking up room in a storage unit or something like that, or some warehouse, and you're paying every month to keep those sitting there, and you realize, wait a minute, I actually don't know anything about actually just selling a product on a website. We'll have to get into all of that in some other video, but this is the basic back of the envelope budgeting that everybody needs to start filling out for their Kickstarter or other crowdfunding campaign. In the last video, we broke down a basic back of the envelope budget for what we're trying to do here, and now we're going to take that budget and we're going to plug that into a basic structure for a marketing campaign to try to raise those funds. So we're looking at marketing effort, and here is my basic rule of thumb for a Kickstarter marketing campaign. And that is, you need to have 50% of your acquired backers before the project even launches. If you want to be more conservative, which I recommend, then you need more than 50%, 60, 70, 75%, 80%. The more backers you have before the campaign even starts, the better your project is going to go. Because we've already said, what was the secret to running a successful crowdfunding campaign? Having a large number of people who are very enthusiastic about you and your product and are ready to back your campaign on the very first day. So the more people you have like that, the easier your crowdfunding campaign is going to go. And I would like to go in with no less than 50% of the necessary backers who are basically already ready to pledge to the campaign. Very importantly, it is not Kickstarter's responsibility to get you backers. And there does seem to be a lot of confusion about this, because when I talk to a number of people when I'm doing some kind of consulting on a crowdfunding campaign or something like that, a lot of people think that there are just a whole bunch of backers who like to send people money on Kickstarter. There's thousands of them that are on the Kickstarter webpage just ready to give you money, and you've just got to go and pick up the money by putting up the page on Kickstarter or other crowdfunding platform. That is not the case. Kickstarter does not get you backers. You go to Kickstarter and say, "Hey, I want to raise funds on your website. I want to run a Kickstarter campaign." Kickstarter says, "Fantastic. Bring a whole bunch of people who have a whole lot of money with you, and then we'll take our cut." Right? That's what Kickstarter does. So Kickstarter is the platform that allows you to, do all of the stuff as far as raising the funds and doing the transactions and then doing the updates and things like that. But you have to bring your backers with you to Kickstarter. Kickstarter doesn't have backers for your project. So that's why we have to do some type of marketing effort in order to get backers to the campaign. So here is an example from the tabletop game industry, and this is for Scythe. This is done by Stonemeyer Games, and Jamie, who runs this company, was a major force in crowdfunding in tabletop games. And I want to show you this. He doesn't do Kickstarter anymore because he's done Kickstarter, launched his company, did several Kickstarters, and now doesn't use Kickstarter anymore to launch his product. So in that case, it is a fantastic success story. But this was a major hit for him. And in this case, Scythe had 17,739 backers. They pledged $1.8 million to help bring this project to life. And so this is a board game. And I know that he started marketing this campaign about a year in advance. I was looking at when his videos and things like that, and also the Board Game Geek page went live, and it was about a year before the Kickstarter campaign went live. So he was talking about this game and what it was going to be for a long time prior to running the campaign. And you can see that it clearly worked for him. I mean, this is a major operation here, and it was a major success for him. We're looking at here some graphs, and this is maybe very interesting if you haven't ever seen anything like this. We are looking at the amount of money that was pledged each day of the campaign for this Scythe board game, and then down here in green, we're looking at the number of backers per day that came in. And you can see this kind of U shape. You know, there's a lot of people and a lot of money coming in very early in the campaign, like the first 3 days. Then we bottom out here during the middle part of the campaign, and then we start to go back up at the end of the campaign. That U shape is a very classic kind of curve for a Kickstarter campaign to have. And if you're running it correctly, I would say, then it's probably the shape that yours would have as well. There are some other advanced techniques that can come in if other people are doing other things in the middle of the campaign. But in general, I would say this U shape right here for anybody who's running a campaign is basically what you should strive for and also expect. Because everybody also says during the middle of the campaign, oh, I'm in the middle of the campaign, I'm in this lull. Well, that's okay, because that even happened here with Jamie here, when even though he got to 1.8 million, it's not like every day was like his first day. There was definitely this lull in the center. Now, of course, when you're raising this amount of money and you have this number of people enthusiastic about your project, I know that in the middle here, having 263 backers come in and raise $27,000 in like the middle of the project, which you're seeing here, that doesn't sound like a lull to a lot of people. A lot of people would be very happy with that. But certainly, if you're looking at the first few days and how much is coming in, comparatively, relatively, you've got a lull here. But that's okay. So, but as you can see, on his very first day, 5,933 backers came in. That's day one. So, and they brought in $573,236. So that's exactly what you want. He had a large number of people who were ready to back this campaign on day one. The campaign went live, and then 5,933 people showed up and pledged an aggregate over $500,000, $570,000, well over $500,000. So he brought it, and that's exactly what you need to do. Day two is typically your second best day. Yeah, he had another 1,679 people come in on day two, and brought in $159,000, almost $160,000 on day two, and then kind of you go down to day three, and then day four and day five is about when you start your kind of middle section of the campaign. He hit it hard, and why was he able to hit it hard in the first 3 days, and especially first day here? It's because all of those backers were ready for this game. Something a lot of people were expecting, and a lot of people had a lot of expectation and excitement around this game when it launched on Kickstarter. Then you're finding people who are just finding out about it, what's going big, oh my God, I need to get in on this. So that's all going during the middle part of the campaign. And then, of course, you do have a lot of people who will wait until the last minute. And so that's why your final 3 days, final 3 days to go, 2 days to go, final day, there are people who are always wait to the last minute to pledge. You're telling everybody, hey, we're ending. If you're not in, you need to get in here, by the end of the day or whatever it is, and you should pick up. So it's very common to start having that U shape go up again the last 3 days, especially if you're telling everybody who hasn't backed yet, hey, 3 days to go, 2 days to go, 1 day to go, come in here and get this campaign. So this U shape is kind of crowdfunding done right. So if you've got this U shape, I would basically say you've done crowdfunding right. You front loaded the campaign, very common. You've brought people with you when the campaign launched, and then your people showed up and you funded your project. That's the way this should go, and basically what you should expect, again, if you do it right. So if your goal is to create something like that, well, we're going to have a bucket for marketing. And so we're going to need to figure out how much money we're going to have to use to potentially get something like that if that's what you're trying to do. So I've got our buckets set up here again. We got pre-production, we've got marketing, we've got production, we've got freight and shipping that are all in here. And we're going to kind of use some numbers very similar to what we set up in a basic, that back of the envelope budgeting, in order to kind of figure out what a marketing budget would be. So let's see what we got here. So let's say that we're going to spend $2,000 in pre-production. So maybe you're creating a board game, maybe you're creating some other kind of product, and basically to get your product completely prototyped and go from an idea to something you can actually photograph and show people and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to create. Let's say you're going to spend $2,000. All right, you use your own numbers as always. Now, we're trying to basically solve for X here, because we got some type of marketing budget we know we're going to have to need, but how much are we going to actually going to need to spend? Well, I'm not sure. So let's just put X in there. We're trying to solve for X. Now, let's say we're looking at a production cost of, in this case, $21,600. This is what we would have to give to a manufacturer to get our product done. And in this case, again, for the sake of example, let's say that means we're going to be ordering 3,000 units at $7.20 a piece. Okay, so that's how I know that I got to give a manufacturer $21,600 in order to get this done. And then let's say that I'm going to spend $9,000 to freight 3,000 units over to the warehouse. And then I'm also going to need $7,650 to ship 900 units. So in this case, I've already been through the back of the envelope budgeting, and I'm going to order 3,000 units, but I'm planning on 900 of those units going out the door as a result of the Kickstarter campaign. And it looks like, what is this? I'm going to be spending $850. It looks like, I've been through my estimations, and I'm going to be spending $8.50 to ship the products. So that's why I need $7,650 for shipping. So if these are the kinds of numbers I'm looking at right here, what's my main pledge level? So let's say that I'm trying to get people to basically bring me $40 for the product, and I'm going to be charging $6 in shipping. So in this case, notice this is also very common, that I'm basically subsidizing the shipping, because I know down here it's going to cost me $8.50 in order to ship this product. But maybe for some reason, I don't think that people are actually going to be willing to pay $8.50. I may have to eat some cost of the shipping if I think that, I don't know if people will pay that to ship the product. So in this case, I'm going to pay to the shipping company $8.50 per product to cover both the labor and packaging plus actually the cost of the postage. But I'm only going to charge my backers $6 in shipping. So I'm subsidizing it by $2.50 plus $40 for the actual product itself, whatever it is. So that means that I'm going to be collecting $46 on average from a backer total. I'm going to try to get 1,000 people in here to pledge. That means that there's going to be $46,000 on the page. Again, plug in your numbers. Obviously, just because there's $46,000 on the Kickstarter page, that does not mean that $46,000 is going to hit my bank account, because I have to pay Kickstarter fees and I have to pay payment processing fees. So that means that $41,860 would end up in the bank. And as you can see, as we're going through this, this is kind of like a wheel. You start someplace and you start plugging in numbers, and then you may find out that it does or does not work based on those assumptions, and so then you have to go back and revise. Well, maybe I need more backers then, or maybe I need a lower cost product, or maybe I need to charge the backers more for the rewards, or whatever it is in order to make all of this work. So you're going to hit $41,860 in the bank account after this. Well, I know that $7,650 of that I cannot touch, because I have got to hold that in order to ship all of the products. And then also $9,000 worth of that has to be held for freight. So that's money I can't touch. I know that once this is done, I got to pay shipping and I got to pay freight. So that means, what is this? $25,210 is actually usable in the bank account to do something with, like get the product manufactured. So you may be able to see what I'm talking about as far as sorting through all of these numbers based on your numbers and trying to make sure you've got something that's going to work, because all these numbers are going to tell you, for example, how much your pledge level actually has to be, because That's going to tell you how many backers do I need, what do I need the pledge level to be in order to get the money in order to raise that. And so in this case, I've got this $25,000 usable in the bank, and I know that I have to pay $21,600 in production. That means I've got a few thousand to spare. I'm kind of running it rather tight here because, like I said, there are always some other expenses, or something may not go quite right, or you have to have something redone or whatever. So I've got a little bit of a margin in here, not a whole lot of a margin, but I got a little bit of a margin. So these numbers kind of in theory work, but I'm still trying to solve for X, which is how much my marketing budget potentially needs to be. So the question now becomes, how do I get 1,000 backers? Because that's what the marketing budget's going to pay for. I've got to have a marketing budget that's going to get me 1,000 backers. Well, so how do you get 1,000 backers? So if we're going by our general rule of thumb, which is that I want to have half of my backers already already committed before the campaign even launches in order to create that curve, I need to put 500 backers on a product-specific pre-launch list. So I need a list of 500 backers who will come and back the project. If you want to be more conservative, increase that number. 600 backers, 700 backers, 800 backers. Obviously, the more backers that you have that say, yeah, I'll absolutely back this campaign when it goes live. The more you have like that, the easier your campaign's going to get. So if you can get 1,000, go ahead and get 1,000 on it. But I wouldn't want to go forward with less than 500, just as a rule of thumb. So if you can get more, get more. Now the question is, how many people who tell you they're going to back your project actually end up backing your project? Great question. I would figure that it's between 5 and 15%. Just because somebody says, oh yeah, this sounds great, I'd back this project, does that mean they actually come and back your project? No. So historically, I would say between 5 and 15% do. I was talking to somebody just yesterday who was saying they always figure on a 3% conversion rate. So that's much more conservative here. I tend to think that if you're down at 2 or 1%, then you've done something wrong. I have had that happen before, and it's because something actually went wrong. Like your backers weren't expecting the price. Like the price may have been too high. So when they finally got to the page, they balked and didn't end up backing the campaign because you hadn't adequately prepared them for the price. The price was much higher than they were expecting, or something like that. Or there was something really weird about your campaign. Something went wrong in some kind of respect. But on the other hand, this other guy I was talking to, he was saying, I plan on 3%. So I think that's fine. Maybe 7% is high here. I'm saying let's plan on 7%. That may be too ambitious. You may want to be more conservative with your estimation here. But this number, if it's higher than you're expecting, once it's all said and done, then you realize you have a hit. Because if you've gone through all of these numbers, and let's say you do use 3%, as your target, you think, oh, well, I think about 3% of these people will actually come through for me. And then 18% do, you got a hit. And that's when you have much more money than you're expecting, and you're doing fantastic. You're like, whoa, oh my God, this did so much better than I was expecting. Well, yeah, because you planned on 3% coming through. And actually people loved the product, were really there, and 18% came through. If something like that happens, then you're raising lots of money. That has happened to me. I ran a campaign which we had set up all the numbers and planned for a 7% conversion rate, exactly like I'm saying here. That's why I got 7 here. Turned out I had an 18% conversion rate. Well, if you plan for 7% and then 18% of the people come out, well, then you've got a hit. You've got a hit. So that's what you're looking for. So you plan conservatively, but then if you want to hope, well, that's the hope part. Well, I hope we do better than that. But I know that if I just do 3% or 4% or 7% or whatever it is you're planning on, the more conservative, the better. You know that, well, you'll be okay. Therefore, if you have 7,000 people sign up, that will probably get you 490 backers if they convert at a rate of 7%. So if you were trying to get 500 backers, 7,000 signups almost does it at a conversion rate of 7%. If they end up converting at 3%, though, well, you've missed your target and you've got a problem. So you may want to be more conservative and say 3%. You run your own numbers. Said that before. Run your own numbers based on your product, your current shipping costs and all of that, and also your level, what level of conversion rates you're comfortable with as far as how conservative you want to be. But for the sake of example here, we'll just continue with that. If you get 7,000 people to sign up and they convert at a rate of 7%, you'll have 490 backers. Very close to your 500 backer goal to have on your list. So how do you get people to sign up for your Kickstarter? Well, here is your classic and basic internet marketing strategy. This is kind of Internet Marketing 101. There are different ways, but your basic strategy is always to drive traffic to a landing page where people will sign up. So you have a landing page set up that tells people about what you're creating and what you're doing, and then you drive traffic to that landing page and you get people to sign up if they are interested. Internet Marketing 101. How do you drive traffic? Well, there are basically two ways. First is your existing network. Don't expect too much from this at first. If you are a person who has spent like a tremendous amount of effort building a following on a social media platform, maybe you've got 100,000 YouTube subscribers or 50,000, or maybe you've got 30,000 Instagram followers or something like that who like what you're doing, and you're building a product for them, then you can talk to those people about it, send them over to the landing page and get them to sign up. So if you haven't done anything like that, if you don't have an existing network of people, then you're going to be starting from scratch on that. And that happens to be the case with a lot of creators. They go and create a product, but they haven't done any existing network building. I mean, that was the case with me when I first started with War of Kings. We were trying that. We were trying social media and things like that, but we were basically starting cold. We had our product, but we didn't have any kind of existing network. And that's why you don't expect too much out of it in the beginning. I will also say that it's very important to make sure that your product that you're creating, whatever it is, matches your existing network if you're going to use the existing network. Because I see this happen too. Just because you have a large existing following does not mean that you're going to be able to fund your creative project. You've got to match what you're creating with the people who are following you. And if you do that, you can have a hit. But just because you have a large number of people following you doesn't necessarily mean they're going to come out for a particular product, especially if there's some kind of mismatch there. And that does frequently happen. As an example, let's say you're an artist. You've got an Instagram following, you post your art on Instagram. You've got a bunch of people who like your art. And so they may come and buy prints from you at conventions. You may sell some of your art on your website and stuff like that. And now you're going to do a board game that's got your art in it. Okay, are you connected with board gamers? They may love your art, but just because somebody loves your art doesn't necessarily mean they are into board games, like to play board games, and would back your board game. So that happens a lot. Well, hey, people love my art. I'm going to do this board game with it. Well, but do the people that you're connected with really like board games? May not be the case. They may not come out for the board game. I've seen some very weird ones. Oh, and I'm actually trying to think of this example, but it had something to do with animals in a zoo or something like that. That there was like somebody with a following who did things with animals at the zoo a lot, and there was a big following. I think it was Instagram about different videos and pictures with animals and things like that. And then they tried to go to crowdfunding, but they went to crowdfunding with a product that really had nothing to do with zoos and animals. So they would talk about their Kickstarter campaign on their Instagram page, but their Instagram people didn't really care about that because they were there to see cute pictures of animals and stuff at the zoo and what was going on with them. And then we had this completely different kind of product. I didn't. They had this completely different kind of product that didn't really connect with that audience. So those people didn't come out. So if you're building a following, make sure that the product that you're creating as a creative matches with those, and then you can use your existing network. If you're building something completely different, you're also going to be starting from scratch, and you may be disappointed that your people do not come out for it. So you want to use your existing network if you can, and if you have one. But if you don't, you're going to be building one. And then if you don't have one, then basically you're going to be paying for traffic. The more targeted that you can make your paid traffic, and also the better the offer, the less expensive your marketing effort's going to be. Using your existing network is typically not very expensive, and that's why people love having an existing network. But if you don't have that, then you're going to have to pay for traffic. And so your goal is to be extremely targeted in who you're showing this to, and you want to show them something really nice. And then if you're showing them something that's really nice that they are very interested in, then you're going to pay less to get people to sign up than if you've got a very unfocused, untargeted campaign, or if what you're making is not really all that cool. I mean, don't do that. Make your thing as cool as you possibly can, and that way people see it and go, oh, wow, yeah, I'd back that. Cool. That's going to reduce your marketing cost. So let's say we set up one of these landing pages, and there's a lot I could say about landing page design and everything like that, and I'll have to do that in some other videos. This isn't a video about how to create landing pages and what makes good ones and stuff like that. But basically, a landing page is going to explain information about your product, and if people want to back the project, they're basically going to sign up on an email list so that you can email them when the campaign goes live. So what's the math behind a landing page? Well, we're going to have to direct, let's say, paid advertising, or paid traffic through advertising. Who is going to see the advertising? If they see the advertising, will they click the link to come over to the landing page? That's the goal, right? They see the advertising, they come over to the landing page. What percentage of people who see the advertising are going to come to the landing page? I figure 2%. I try to get 2%. If I'm under 2%, I try to continue to work with it until I'm at 2% or above. Sometimes you can't get there, and that means your advertising is going to be more expensive. But if you can get 2%, that's what I tend to plan on and what I try to get. So let's use 2%. 2% of the people who see it will actually investigate more. And then they're going to click that link and they're going to come to your landing page to learn more about what your product is to go to Kickstarter with. So X% of the people who are now there on your landing page are going to enter their email address and say, yeah, man, I think this is cool. Definitely let me know when this comes out. And then once they've signed up, well, hopefully you're going to get that 7%. Or your 3%, or your 4%, or whatever it is that you're conservatively planning on. If they sign up, 3% of those people are going to come through for you and back your campaign. So what's this X here? What's your conversion rate on X? So what is a good landing page conversion rate? Well, the truth is this is highly variable and dependent on traffic quality. There is a lot of information out there about landing page design and A/B testing. If you get into internet marketing a lot and you start landing page design, a lot of people are going to talk to you about A/B testing your pages to try to increase your conversion rate. A/B testing is when you've got two different versions of your landing page, but you change one thing on one version of it and then send traffic to it and see which one converts better. And then you take the one that converts better and then maybe you do it again. You say, all right, this one worked, so let me change one more thing. Which one works better to try to increase your conversion rate on your landing page. I used to hear about landing page A/B testing and all of that all the time online. And, it can be things as simple as, what color should the sign up button be? Are most people responding to a green button or an orange button or a blue button? Or, what color button makes somebody really come over there, makes somebody a little bit more likely to go ahead and push the sign up. I've done that before. I've tried to do A/B testing and all kinds of statistical analysis on, how people are coming in. That was a long time ago. I don't do that anymore. And that's because after I really got into all of these numbers, you realize that, in order to do an A/B test, basically what you're trying to do is you are trying to control everything. So everything is exactly the same, except for one thing that you're trying to change, whether that's the green button or the blue button, for instance, or, picture A or picture B or whatever it is. But there's one thing that you really can't control, which I find to be the really determining factor in whether or not somebody signs up, and that's the quality of the traffic that is being sent to the page. And you may or may not have control over that, and in many cases you don't have control over that, because if you've got traffic of different quality coming to your web page, those people are going to respond differently to your web page anyway. And that variation in traffic quality can just overwhelm any kind of statistical significance over green button or blue button or anything small like that. So this is why I said earlier that having a highly targeted audience, that's sending high quality traffic to the landing page, because you already know this person's probably very interested. You're showing your advertising to just the right person. It's like, hey, I got something really cool I think you might like. Oh yeah, let me check out this landing page. If you've got people who are just kind of like ho-hum about this, then they're going to be lower quality traffic. And then also, if you've got a really amazing product that you're designing, once people get to that landing page, they're going to go, oh, wow, this is really good. If you've got kind of a ho-hum average product, when people get to the landing page, they think, oh, well, maybe this isn't quite as cool as I thought, and they're not going to sign up. So showing it to the right people and then having something really cool that they'll want, that's going to overwhelm all kinds of other smaller variables. I was finding out, like, what if you do get picked up by some blog or YouTube channel? We don't depend on that for marketing. I talk about that in other videos. But let's say that happens during your pre-launch. And so you're sending people in by some type of paid traffic to come and check out what you're doing here. And then somebody with a YouTube channel says, hey, this person's doing this, you ought to check this out. And so some number of people come in from the YouTube channel. It might be the case that those people who are coming in from that YouTube channel, for instance, are exactly the kinds of people that you want to have on the page, and so are going to be high converting people once they get there. But the chances are probably not. It might actually be lower quality traffic because they're they're told to check out this check out this landing page by the YouTuber who they really like. So they go and do that because they're like, oh, this person's recommending this. They get to the page, but they're not really quite as in tune with this particular product as they would like. They're really coming over because that person told them to. Well, they're going to not sign up at a higher rate than maybe your targeted advertising is. As an example, it might be the other way around. But because you've got this fluctuation in traffic quality, which is going to be a major determining factor of the conversion rate of your landing page, you may be overwhelming all of your smaller variables, and so it just may not work. That if you look at it, actually, if you change nothing on your landing page, you're going to have a tremendous amount of variation in day-to-day conversion rates in the landing page because of things like traffic quality. And so if you're looking at the natural variation of your landing page, in order to make some kind of change on it, to do A/B testing and things like that, you're going to have to make sure that your change actually gets outside of the daily variation in traffic quality, and you're probably not going to be able to detect that statistically. I know that's a lot to say here, but the key point here is, especially if you're starting out, have a fantastic product that you know people are going to love, create a very nice looking page for it, professional looking page for it, and then send high quality traffic to it. And don't try to spend days and days and days fiddling over, green button, yellow button, this picture or that picture. I mean, you can do some adjustments here when you realize what's working and what's not, but endless hours and hours and hours of modifying the landing page isn't key. Have a good one, have a professional one, and then send high quality traffic to it. So here's an example of that. For the original Elder Dice landing page, I didn't change that, and its natural variation in conversion rate from day to day was between 22% and 37%. So you can tell that's a large range of kind of natural variation day to day. And so with that kind of range of variation, here again, red button, green button, that's not going to get you outside of that natural range of variations. It's going to be very difficult or impossible to detect statistically if any changes you're making are significant. So there's a real world example. Conversion rate on the website, but on the landing page between 22 and 37%. So let's say 30%. Let's say that X then is going to be 30% for your landing page conversion. Now we go back to the math on that. I told you we'd be looking at a whole bunch of numbers to try to figure out what your campaign is going to be like. If you needed 7,000 signups and are getting a 30% conversion rate when somebody hits your landing page, then you need to send 23,333 people to that landing page to check out your product. Probably, in general, all of this is a lot more than you're thinking. We talked about in the very beginning how you're going to have to mobilize a lot of people in order to crowdfund your project. Crowdfunding. Crowd means a crowd, lots of people. So we got to get 23,333 people to your landing page if you need 7,000 signups and you've got a 30% conversion rate. If 2% of the people who see the ad click to the landing page, the ad needs to be shown to 1,166,650 people. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. Here's the importance of your marketing research. You've got to, when you're designing your product, do you have at least a potential market for your product that you can reach out to that's at least 1,200,000? Because you're going to need to show your advertising to that number of people in order to get your signups. So a lot of online advertising is pay per click. You'd be paying, as soon as somebody clicks the link like you're trying to get them to do, and they go over, then that's what you would pay the social media company. And if, for example, you are paying 15 cents per click, you're going to need 23,333 clicks because that's how many people are going to go over to the landing page. That's going to be $3,500. If you can get 15 cents per click. This is one of those things that changes dramatically. I forget how long ago I actually created this particular slide, but that changes. Social media algorithms change. It's going to change based on your particular product in your particular area. You might not be getting 15 cents per click. These things go up because more and more stuff is coming out on social media. More and more people want to advertise. Everything is going up. So what if you need 20 cents per click or 25 cents? What can you pay? How much money do you actually have to pay to advertise this? This is what you need to be thinking about. If you're getting 15 cents per click and you need this, and these are all of your numbers, $3,500 worth of marketing budget. So now we kind of have some idea where we can go back to plug in X is what we were working on. So if, assuming 15% per click and all of that, we need $3,500 worth of marketing. So that means that looking at this, if you are doing your pre-production and you're trying to create your product for $2,000 and then you're going to spend $3,500 in marketing, you need $5,500 to put to this project in order to get to Kickstarter. That actually sounds pretty good to me. You're going to be doing all of this stuff, looking at these numbers here. I would say that would be good. So it may be higher than this. So I would say this is optimistic. Of course, you may not be able to create your product for $2,000. Your prototypes and design and stuff like that, maybe more expensive than that. Could be much more expensive than that, depending on what you're doing. So your pre-production budget could be much higher than that, and your marketing budget may need to be much higher than that. So you've got to go through all these numbers using your numbers for your idea. But if you could spend $5,500 and raise the $46,000 and also get 3,000 units of your product, having 2,100 of those products left over, I mean, this seems pretty good. This seems like it would be a good thing to do. Again, assuming the numbers are realistic for your project. Now, where does that $5,500 come from? Well, we haven't really talked about investors, so to speak, but we should probably mention that here, because the investor may be you. And in fact, it probably is going to be you. You're going to be pulling money out of your pocket to create the product, get it to prototype stage, and then you'll be pulling money out of your pocket in order to market it. So probably you are your own investor. That might not be the case. Maybe you don't have, in this case, $5,500, but you take all of these numbers to somebody who does and say, listen, I need $5,500. And then if all of this works out the way that I think it's going to work out, and here are all of my numbers, then I'll be able to get you some type of return on this, and we're going to be able to do all of this. And so in this case, $5,500 would be returning to the investors in order to get them back to zero. Now, if you are your own investor, you may be happy with no return on your money. You just want the money back, and then you'll try to make the money by selling the extra units. Very, very common. If you've got somebody else who's loaning you that $5,500, that person is probably going to ultimately want more than $5,500 back, but you want to return that $5,500 in order to get them back to zero. And you probably want to do that with yourself. This was pretty common in my campaigns, especially my early campaigns. You should be tracking your budget and how much you're spending on your campaign. And then basically, after the money had come in from Kickstarter, we returned the money to ourselves that we had spent to get this campaign off the ground. That way, everybody was back at zero. Like, when David and I were doing Elder Dice, David and I fronted all of that money ourselves in order to do the pre-production work. And of course, we were doing the labor free, but we had to put out some money for the prototype development and things like that. I mean, there's certainly some costs. So we outlaid that ourselves. Then we outlaid the marketing ourselves. We kept track of how much we spent. And then after the campaign was over and we had the money in the account, after we had paid the manufacturers, we wrote a check to ourselves to get back to zero. We weren't making money at that point, but at least the money that we had put in, we had gotten back out, and now we were sitting at zero. And that's important as a creative person, because then you can use that money again to start another project. Because you're like, if I put in $5,000, then I run the Kickstarter campaign, I'll get that $5,000 back, and then I can start doing something else. But a more conservative thing to do might be to say, well, I'm not going to take any of that money back. I'm not going to get myself back to zero until I'm completely done and I've shipped all of the backers. But you're going to be looking at your money to decide whether or not you can afford that or not. Because in this case, you can't. Because if I need $3,500 marketing, that means I put $5,500 in. I owe somebody, hopefully myself, $5,500. But if I try to write that $5,500 check to get myself back to zero or somebody else back to zero, I've only got $19,710 usable in the bank, and that ain't going to work. You can see I'm just subtracting that $5,500 from what I used to have in the bank, and now only have $19,700, which is now less than the money I need in order to pay the manufacturer. So I got $19,700, and I need to pay $21,600. And again, you don't want to be cutting it this close anyway. So if you just owe it to yourself, you might say, well, I tell you what, I'm going to take $1,000 and I'll put that back in my bank account so I can start working on my next project. I'll just have to owe myself that $5,500 later. If you've borrowed this $5,500 from somebody, well, they may be less happy with you because you're like, I can't pay you the $5,500. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to create this product. I'm going to have to, give you $1,000 or something, and then I'm going to have to owe you on this $4,500, and then they're in the hole. If you're borrowing from somebody or you've got an outside investor, they're always much happier once they get back to zero. So you should be getting them back to zero as close as soon as you can, because then any money you give them on top of that is them making money. But they're always much happier once they've gotten their initial investment back, and you probably are too, because like I said, that's what allows you to go on and try to do another project. We're not paying ourselves. Again, you can see you're not paying yourself. You're doing a lot of labor here. You're doing a lot of work. For free. In this case, hoping you're going to recover money on the 2,100 products that you're going to sell later. That money you're returning to yourself isn't making money. That's just trying to get you back to zero so you can go do another project. So let's talk about a basic marketing funnel, and you hear about this a lot in internet marketing. And if you haven't heard of a marketing funnel before, this is basically an overview of this that's also specifically adapted to running a Kickstarter or other crowdfunding kind of campaign. So this is basically an X-ray schematic of what you're going to be going through in order to do this campaign. So over here on the right of the screen, you've got this triangle, this funnel that's coming into your Kickstarter campaign. And we're talking about how many people, you're trying to get some number of backers. Well, we saw that, you're going to have to show your advertising to so many people to get them interested and blah, 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 and going down to ultimately start your Kickstarter campaign. So that can be conceptualized as a funnel. So basically, we're talking about how many people do you have to make aware of your product in order to get them to come, some number of people to come and back your campaign. Because if people are not aware that you exist, if they're not aware that you're doing something, then they're not going to come and back your Kickstarter campaign. But just because you make somebody aware of what you're doing does not mean they're going to be interested in what you're doing. Hopefully, if you're doing well with your targeted advertising, which how to do that is a completely different, separate subject we'll have to talk about in other videos. But hopefully, if you're doing well with that, then the percentage of people who you make aware of your project will also be interested. Because if you're not, then you're not doing your targeting well. If you make a whole bunch of people aware, but they're not interested, then you're not targeting your audience well enough. You're not showing it to the right people. So hopefully some decent percentage of people who you make aware of your project will also be interested in it. Then hopefully some decent percentage of people who are interested in your project will ultimately decide to back your campaign, and they're going to sign up and then ultimately decide to back. So that's your funnel there. Make a large number of people aware of your campaign. Hopefully a large number or a large percentage of those people will be interested in it, and then some percentage, hopefully a large one, will decide to back your campaign after being interested in it. So that's all what's happening. We call this pre-launch, before the campaign even launches. So you're ready. Then you go live on Kickstarter or other crowdfunding platform. So this section right in here is when you are actually on Kickstarter, and that's what a lot of people think of as running the Kickstarter campaign. The time when you launch the campaign, your clock's ticking down, and then it closes over here. So you're trying to get as many people in there to back the campaign while that's live. So we also should talk about, running a Kickstarter campaign. What does that mean? As you can probably tell, to me, what running a Kickstarter campaign means a whole bunch of stuff that you've got to do, from the initial conceptualization of your idea to the prototyping to manufacture to getting a quote from a manufacturer to setting up all of your marketing. And then, yes, of course, there is that amount of time that you're actually live on Kickstarter. But then after that, then you've got to do all of your manufacturing. You've got to do all of your freight. You've got to do all of your shipping. Then you've got to move the product into some type of retail channel. And that's what it means to me to do a Kickstarter campaign. That's doing the complete circle and making that wheel turn. And a lot of people don't realize that, and they think of the Kickstarter campaign just narrowly being those 25 or 30 days or 14 days or however long your campaign's going to be. That's what you do while you're on Kickstarter, that's a whole nother lesson. But there's going to be something that happens, but there's going to be that Kickstarter campaign where hopefully all of your pre-launch has paid off, your backers are coming in, you're funding your project, and then boom, the campaign finally ends. Your timer hits 0, and then that's when people's cards run, their debit or credit card or whatever, and then 2 weeks later, the money will be deposited into your account. Just because somebody backs the campaign does not mean that their card's going to run. I think I used to have a lot more information in here as well on that, but I took it out. But, people cancel Kickstarter pledges. So that's kind of a disappointment, but it's true that, just because somebody pledges does not mean that you're actually going to get to finalize with them, because people can decide to withdraw from the campaign. There isn't a whole lot that you can do about that. And perhaps in some other video, we'll talk about why people cancel Kickstarter pledges. But really, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. There's no particular outstanding reason that something has gone wrong on your campaign that I'm aware of. Well, it might mean that. But in general, if everything's going well, you're still going to have cancellations, and it's just not your fault. But that means that some percentage of people are going to cancel their pledge, and there's nothing you can do about that other than overloading people. So, if you think, I want to have those 500 people to pledge, well, 5 or 10 of those might end up canceling their pledge. So if you think that 5 or 10 of those people might cancel their pledge, then you need to overload by another 5 or 10 people, right? Which means increasing your marketing and all of that. So you're going to have people pledge, you're going to have some people cancel their pledge during the Kickstarter campaign, and then the cards will run. The money will be deposited in your account 2 weeks later. Hopefully that day or the next day, you go to the bank and you wire the deposit to the manufacturer so that you can get that going. Because I'm a big believer, and I've talked about this in other videos, about making sure that your Kickstarter project is about 95% of the way done before the campaign even runs. Don't try to do your Kickstarter project after the campaign. It needs to be 95% of the way done before your Kickstarter runs. You got about 2 weeks after the Kickstarter campaign to finalize that last 5%. Make sure everything's in the hand of your manufacturer. Kickstarter deposits the funds, then you wire to your manufacturer and you get the product made. Then you've got this long gap during manufacturing, or can be a long gap. 30, 60, 90, 180 days, however long it takes to manufacture your product and get them sitting on pallets ready to ship or for your freight. So then you've got another long wait, especially if things are coming overseas, and especially if like all the ports are jammed up. You've got a long wait where everything gets on an ocean-going vessel and then goes to ports around the world, and then gets on trucks or trains after it gets on the port, and then finally is received by your warehouse. So there's this long wait in there. While you're probably communicating with manufacturers and your freight forwarders and all of that, but you may also be working on another project while all of that's going on, because it may require answering emails, but may not be a full-time job for you right there. But by the way, during this time, you know what's going to be happening? People are going to be canceling. It's just true that especially if you have a large number of people, there's some percentage of people who are going to ask for refunds for their Kickstarter pledge during this time. And we can talk a lot more about that perhaps in other videos, but basically what you do is you refund them. It's my recommendation, easiest thing. People are going to ask you for refunds for all different kinds of reasons. Some people will send you all kinds of different stories about, that their car broke down and they really need the money, and so they're not going to be able to back it, and they're sorry, or they've got a sick family member or relative, or there's all kinds of stories that people send you about why they want their money back for their Kickstarter campaign. So you're going to be having those people leave as well during this long amount of time before you can fulfill the rewards, and so you're going to be refunding them, and there's nothing you can do about that either, other than of course to overload the Kickstarter campaign in the beginning, have more people there to account for people who are going to want refunds before you actually ship the rewards. Then you ship all the rewards, you get all of that in everybody's hands. Hopefully the products are fantastic, there are no problems, everybody loves it, and everybody's happy. There's going to be some amount of time where you're going to be sending replacements, because especially if you're shipping out large numbers of boxes, some people's boxes will get lost in shipping. It's true. Some percentage of that will get lost. So you just replace those. You send those out again to make those people happy. So you've got to account for that. In the earlier example we were looking at, where you were expecting to have 2,100 units, I believe it was, of your product to sell later, well, you're probably not going to have exactly that number, because some percentage of them may get damaged. Actually, in freight, I've had that happen before. So you're going to sustain some number of damages there. I've had no damage, but on the other cases, I've had some damage, like a worker hits your pallet with a forklift, and it hits all of your boxes, and so that destroys a certain number of your products in freight with a forklift. Like, sometimes that happens. So you're going to lose some products there, maybe, You're going to lose some in shipping. Also, you're going to have some damage. We accounted for packing things well with the Misty Morelands Terra Tiles boxes, like I was showing you, in order to reduce the amount of damage in shipping. And we got it down to 0 in that one because we thought about it. But that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes the people who are working at the different delivery companies, accidents happen, things happen. Sometimes boxes are just smashed. Somebody opens it up and they're like, oh my God, look what just arrived at my front door. It just looks absolutely trounced and the product is damaged. That sucks. I hate it for backers when that happens. That's why I ship again. So you're going to send out some more there. So you're going to need to send out replacements for that reason. And then hopefully after all of that, after some amount of time, you're done. We should talk about, when does a Kickstarter campaign end? That's a whole nother topic. But basically, at some amount of time, you'll have sent all the replacements. All of them will have been shipped. You won't be hearing back from anybody, and you'll go, phew, it's finally done. It's over. Now I can move on to the next stage of the project, which is selling to retail channels, which is beyond the scope of this presentation. But then you're selling on a website. You may be sending to distributors. You may be sending to retail people. That's a whole nother phase of your project in keeping this whole thing spinning. But that basically ends your Kickstarter campaign. It's a lot of stuff, right? It is. And that's what I was talking about in the beginning of this, understanding the monumental amount of work that it is to run a Kickstarter campaign. And all right, let's wrap this up because I know this has just been a massive presentation here. And so I appreciate it if you are still with me here. And I hope that it has been extremely beneficial to you. I do this because I do believe that there has never been a better time to be a creative person. If you want to do these things yourself, if you want to get stuff out in the world, that you want to exist, well, all the tools and communication and everything that we've got now, this is the time to be doing it because it can be done yourself. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff that you have to do, but it can be done yourself. And, I know there are a lot of people out there who have amazing ideas and who want to create it and get it out there. And so, I'm trying to communicate the lessons that I've learned by doing all of this so you don't have to go through and, learn everything yourself and basically reinvent the wheel. Take the lessons that I've learned and put them in action for you because if you may create something that I absolutely love. I love board games and books and action figures and movies and stuff like that. And you could have one that I really enjoy. So it'd be fantastic if I helped you make it. All right. So wrapping up here, in order to be successful, you are going to need to mobilize a large number of people, and it is your responsibility to do this. Not anybody else's, not Kickstarter's. In order to be successful, you have to mobilize the people. This means designing an awesome product is not enough. Just because you build it does not mean they will come. You have to think like a publisher from day one. And that means you're going to have to work on marketing. You have to work on marketing, you have to work on budgeting, and you're going to have to be getting yourself out there to mobilize that large number of people. Some people won't want to think like a publisher, and that means you need to do something else and pair up with different publishers. Hope is not a marketing strategy. Don't create something you've really wanted to create and that you're really emotionally invested in, that you've I've wanted to do this for years and years, and finally I've got the prototype right here. I hope people come and back it. Don't do that. Especially if you really want this product out there, you are going to have to go through all of the marketing and everything else in order to connect with people who want to back your campaigns and love what you do. The key is to have a large number of people who are very enthusiastic about what you are doing and are ready to back your project on day one. If you have that, then you are in a great position to be successful. If you don't have that, you are probably going to fail, or at least in a very uphill battle in order to fund your project and do what you want to do.